Between client meetings, managing your business, and everyday tasks, who has time to worry about website hosting? With Kinsta's managed WordPress hosting, you don't have to. They handle the technical stuff, delivering lightning-fast load times, enterprise-grade security, and 24/7 365 human-only support. Simply switching to Kinsta could make your site up to 200% faster. Kinsta's custom dashboard makes managing sites easy, with powerful features designed to save you time and effort. Plus, their free expert-led migrations ensure a smooth transition. Ready to see why Kinsta is trusted by thousands of businesses? Get your first month free at kinsta.com. That's KINSTA.com. Kinsta. Simply better hosting.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.
Coming up next on Wheel Bearings episode 210, we've got the Volvo XC90 T8 Recharge, the Porsche Macan, the BMW 430i, electric restomods, and we have a special guest, Mr. Jamie Kitman, to talk about Elon Musk and his car collection. That's all coming up next. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia.
So you've got a business, but what about a brand? The difference? More of you. Wix gives you the freedom to create your website, own your brand, and do it on your own, exactly how you envisioned it. Experience limitless customization. Boost your creativity and efficiency with AI tools for every part of your business journey. Scale up with built-in SEO, e-com, and scheduling features. Put more of you in your business. Go to Wix.com and do it all yourself.
This is episode 210 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
I am Nicole Wakeland from True Car.
And I am Roberto Baldwin, and we'll say Motor One this week.
And we have a special guest joining us this week, Mr. Jamie Kitman. Jamie, thank you so much for stopping by this week and chatting with us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure.
No, I'm sure it will be. You're always interesting to listen to and to read. You've got such an incredible way with words. And what prompted me to reach out to you is I heard your interview on Marketplace yesterday about the article that was just published in the Road Rat. Correct? Is that the right name of the publication?
That's correct.
About Elon Musk, and the title is Elon Musk Doesn't Care If You Like Him. We're going to come back to that in a little bit, but before we do, let's start off with the garage and talk about what we're driving this week. Nicole, why don't you go first?
Okay, I will go first. I had the perfect car to have for the end of summer because summer's pretty much over here in New England. It's going to snow any day now. So I had a 2021 BMW 430i convertible, which is super fun to drive. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I want to say this, and I have to give it like a but. It was beautiful. It's so pretty, but that grill people, the grill, what has happened there? I wanted to get behind the grill on the front of the BMW, and I swear to God, I'm like sitting there looking at it outside the window. I'm like, I can't. I just can't. Even my kids, my daughter actually said to me, who was 17, it's not like she's a toddler and asks odd questions. Serious question. Mom, does it look like that because it does something? Like she thought there was some like engineering reason why it was so big. I'm like, no, honey, it just looks like that. So the grill is hard to get behind, but with this, like she really thought it was like, there's got to be a reason why they would do that to the car. But so other than that, and taking some serious getting used to having that in front of your car, it's beautiful. I love the soft top. The new soft top is fantastic. It is so good. And I realized as I was driving down the highway, we had some rain, and I'm driving the highway and I'm driving by these big tractor trailers, which is normally the kind of thing when you're in a soft top, you almost have to stop conversation for a second because it gets very, very loud. I sort of forgot that I was in one. Like it's so quiet with that top up, you wouldn't even know that it was a convertible, which is pretty impressive. And you can even feel it when you touch the top of it. You can, if you push against it, you can feel that like the sort of insulation and padding there. It's significant. So it's very, very quiet. When you choose to leave the top up. Shh. Yeah, baby could sleep in there because a baby's about all that would fit in the back seats. The back seats are very small. It says that 4 people can sit total in the car. You can fit 2. There is no way on God's green earth that my husband could have sat back there.
Maybe they sit in the grill.
Maybe that's what it's for. Is there like a lever I missed
you can mount
that
a couple
makes
of
some
extra
of that
seats
pop
on the
out?
grill.
Yeah, and they just sit there all in, like on the front. But the back seats, my teenage daughters could sit back there, but it was a squeeze. So it's a 2-seater, really. It's a 4-seater in a pinch. But yeah, you can just barely make it work for 4. It does have a surprisingly roomy little trunk. They gained a little bit of extra space by the change to the convertible top this year. So I think it's like 9 cubic feet, which isn't a ton of space, but it's a convertible. It's not like you're buying an SUV. That's decent. You can actually fit your groceries back there. And power comes
you could also use the back seat for groceries. You could,
but you can't flip the seats up quickly. There's a latch on the back, like it's easier for the person riding in the back to flip open to get them to just like poop, pop forward. But even then, it's not like whoosh, poof, it's forward. It's sort of like. And I'm like, okay, this is great.
It's a convertible, so the top should be down anyway.
Well, but it's also, I live in New Hampshire, so there's like 3 days a year you can do that. So when it's raining and the top is up, it's as you wait for it. So it was quicker to flip the trunk and put them in the trunk and just squish them in and watch the eggs. So let's see, power comes from a 2-liter turbo 4 with 255 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque, 8-speed transmission. They're not like blow your mind numbers, but it moves like that. It's a responsive car. It's fun to drive. It has a nice little like, I'm a sporty little BMW kind of burble going on there. Yeah. Oh, I see. This is when I wish we had video that showed out in the show. Roberto just did this little like dance thing when I said it was a sporty car. Like we need to see this sometimes. So driving it is a lot of fun. I mean, it's a BMW. It kind of drives like a BMW, which means that it's an engaging drive. It's sporty without being so harsh that it feels like it's going to rattle your teeth. So it's comfortable. It's like a sporty car that you can enjoy your time behind the wheel and not think I can do this for about half an hour and then I will have had enough. Like you could go on a long cruise in this. And it has all the fun bells and whistles inside. It has a great big, I think the standard screen's 8 inches, but I had the 10.25 inch screen. So it's a good bit bigger, 16 speaker Harman Kardon audio system that sounds fantastic. So like thumbs up. And it's expensive. I don't know, is it crazy expensive? Maybe my standards for crazy expensive have slipped since I've been doing this, but, base is $53,100, so definitely not cheap. When you add on all of the many things they've added on, there's a whole bunch of M Sport stuff on the one I had. So there's like you get special brakes and blue calipers and a differential, and you get some, it's like M Sport logo on the door sills. So mine went from 53.1 all the way up to 67.2. So it took a little bit of a jump.
That's not crazy though. I mean,
no,
it's too bad.
Right, like it's like sure, it's not the price of a Camry, but it is a sports car. It is a luxury car. It's a convertible. So I felt like if I had $67,000 and I was looking for a fun little sports car, this could fit the bill. So I was pleased, and it was in that brilliant blue. What do they call it? It can't just be blue. Portimao? I'm saying that
Portimao.
wrong. I'm going to... Portimao?
Portimao.
Is that how you...
Yeah.
What
Yes.
you said, Sam. It was that blue metallic is the rest of it. I can say blue metallic. The color was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, beautiful color. So yeah, that was probably
Jamie?
the last gasp of summer that I get too.
Yes.
Yeah, hey, Jamie, I'm curious what you think of BMW's new design direction with the oversized grille kidneys.
I just had an M4 and an M3, and I started out, I'm generally disappointed if I had to give you a two-word answer. But I would say that, you get increasingly numb to it, immune, and, maybe that'll look normal in a while. I mean, really for the last 20 years or more, since when BMW was the style leader. I mean, they sort of still are, even if people should have stopped following them in the middle 90s. But it seems like that you tend to get used to it. And I think there's just a pressure to do something different that drives them. But I don't really understand it. I'm sort of surprised for a company that seems in many ways conservative that they go with kind of like radically awful things like that.
And they're sticking to it.
Yeah.
They're not backing down.
No. But
At least not yet anyway.
I mean, I seem to recall hearing that the Bangle bustle that was on the 7 Series around the turn of the century, and people were up in arms. I mean, at the time I defended it on the grounds that everybody complains that everything looks the same. And of course, everything was starting to look like a BMW as the Japanese and started copying the BMW, and pretty much everybody was making a car that looked sort of like a 5 Series. So here comes BMW, and they sort of break the mold a little bit, and then everybody's complaining. So I think, in general, I don't look to my colleagues in the automotive press for really design direction for the automobile industry. And I don't think anybody really knows what they want until they see it. In any case, the anecdote was that the 7 Series, I think that was the best-selling one, was that first angle-butted one. And it migrated to Lexus and others who did more or less the same thing. So personally, don't care for it, but, generally, like, whatever, I guess, is my view.
Yeah, I think, I could probably live with it on the internal combustion cars.
Did we lose Sam?
Sorry. Oh, there we are. Sorry, I muted myself for a minute because Daisy was barking. I could live with it, I think, on the internal combustion cars. I don't like it, but I could live with it there. Where I think it really annoys me the most, though, is on the new EVs, on the i4 and the iX, particularly on the iX, where it has grown so far out of proportion, and it's not even at all functional. There is no opening at all. There's a small grill opening at the bottom, so the entire kidneys are blocked off. So it just, I don't understand the design direction at all with BMW right now. But let me put this out for a vote. Which would annoy you less, the Civic Type R wing or the giant size kidneys?
The wing annoys me less because that is what you would anticipate on that car for that type of buyer.
I think I'm going to agree because it works on that. They're not sticking it on the back of an Accord.
Yeah.
It works on the car it's on. They're sticking that grill on everything.
Right. And then the final point is that the grill is kind of like the first thing you see, It's like somebody who's got really bad teeth or something like that. It doesn't really matter what their backside looks like because you're so freaked out by that point.
Yeah. So as soon as they smile, and it's like, you don't know what to do.
Right.
Okay. All right. Roberto, what have you been driving?
have I been driving? Hold on, I got to double check. Oh, I drove the 2022 Porsche Macan S. The latest version of the Porsche, probably the last update before the lineup also includes an EV. So I drove the Porsche. I actually drove the Porsche Macan and the Macan S. So I drove the base level and the S version. And I'm just going to say the base, just the regular Macan, if you were just a person who wants a car that handles well and you're not an enthusiast, you're not someone who wants to push a car, the regular Macan is fine. It's fine. But to really get that Porsche, that promise of a Porsche where you have that wonderful handling, but you also have the power that goes hand in hand with that handling, you got to get the Macan S, and that's where it really comes down to, is you got to get the Macan S. I know that the price differential is pretty. There's just a 10,000.
It's about
10,000.
10,500.
So the Macan S starts at $65,400. It is not a cheap SUV. The regular Macan starts at $54,900. It is the least expensive Porsche you can buy, but when you drive,
that's the cheapest Porsche you can buy is $54,000.
Yeah. I think the Cayman starts at 60, low 60s, maybe mid 60s.
I don't think I'd ever looked that up before. I had them all priced higher in my head.
Yeah. So if you're, you're looking for a Porsche, but you don't want to spend a lot of money, you want to have room for maybe some kids or some friends, or you need storage. That's where the Macan comes in, and I'm sure people are still angry about it. It's been out since 2014. It's not a real Porsche because it's an SUV. It's not a real Porsche because it's not air cooled. It's not a real Porsche because blah 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 blah. All the reasons why Porsches aren't, modern Porsches aren't real Porsches. All the reasons why SUVs aren't real Porsches. All the reasons why EVs are not real Porsches. When it comes down to it, when you drive these things, they still feel like a Porsche. They're still how much? Why does this cost so much? Drive a Porsche, then you'll know. That's really what it comes down to. I really, really liked it. I'm always surprised by how well Porsche is able to engineer handling on an SUV. The Macan and the Cayenne are both just ridiculously well handling SUVs. They're well handling sedans. If they were sedans, they would handle really well. The S has that 2.9 liter twin turbo V6 that was in the last generation, I guess the current vehicles, GTS. So you're getting a nice little bump in power, a nice little bump in both horsepower and torque. It's got that 7-speed PDK, which the PDK is so good. It's one of my favorite automatic transmissions out there. If you have to have an automatic transmission, I guess the PDK is the one to have. Coming in and out of corners, it downshifted when it was supposed to. It upshifted when it was supposed to. Everything that you would do with a manual transmission, the PDK, about 85% of the time, it takes care of. So that's all that, praise for backroads driving. 0 to 60, 3.4 seconds. Here's a fun thing, though. So it starts, the one I was driving started at, hold on, let me double check, $65,400. The price tested, that was a lot more. So
$100,000,
and this is $103,000.
Oh my God!
$600. And so now, okay, so I'm gonna put the Sport Chrono package. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, then I'm gonna put the brake. I'm like, okay, well, you probably don't need those super brakes, but okay. And then they just keep adding and adding and adding and adding. That's sort of the Porsche way that people buy a car, and then it just skyrockets because you just keep adding all these things.
That's crazy.
It is insane how much it's $40,000 more. It's a whole other car.
It's a whole other car. Yeah.
It's a whole other car.
You can trick out your Porsche, or you can just buy another car.
Or you could just buy another car.
Buy like a backup car.
Like a second car. You just put it in the back.
Yeah.
Or really.
And that's not even the GTS. The
GTS
takes you up. The starting price of the GTS is another $15,000 on top of that. I think it's like seven. Yeah, you go from $65,400 to $79,900 to go from an S to a GTS, which gets you an extra 55 horsepower, which is it's not bad, but it's only 0.3 of a second, 0 to 60.
Yeah,
it's a lot. That's a lot of money for each tenth of a second.
It is. It's a lot of money for each tenth of a second.
Time is money, so
there is, yeah. There is a discernible difference in acceleration between the Macan and the Macan S. But then once you start getting to the GTS, and then you're just like, wow, that's so much money. And at that point, you're like, well, why are you buying? I'm still a little confused by the super high speed performance edition SUVs as a human, as just a regular person, not as an automotive journalist, because I'm like, well, just get a sports car. But that's a whole other issue in the world. People want SUVs. People are going to buy these. Why not make them? If I make it and I offer it, people will buy it, and that's yeah.
Yeah.
Folks will buy the car. So yeah, no, I am a fan of the Macan S. I probably wouldn't outfit it with $40,000 worth of options.
No.
Yeah, probably not. Probably. Let me think of the two cars. Okay, every vehicle I own doesn't equal $40,000, which just goes to show how cheap I am. So there's that as well. Yeah. And there was no, I didn't get any EPA numbers because there are no EPA numbers yet. And I was driving German spec vehicles, so navigation and all that was sort of, it had no idea where it was at. I think I'm in America. I don't know.
Where have we gone? What's happening?
Yeah, which is always fun when you drive German and or European or Asian spec vehicles where the cars is like, you don't really realize that the radio doesn't work and the navigation is really confused. How did you get here?
Jamie, do you have any thoughts on the Macan?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it when I drove it. By coincidence, I just had been driving a 718 Spider Porsche, which also suspiciously cost $103,800 with options, and it was great. And call me a purist, but I'll take a Boxster, a Cayman, or a 911 over any SUV any day, unless I need to carry more people. But in general, I would die on that rock about why it's stupid to put 600 horsepower into an SUV and encourage people to go around corners faster in them or accelerate faster. But while we're on the subject, I also kind of feel like it reached the point of no return of 10 years ago, where cars were simply getting too fast, and every extra 50 horsepower meant you had to have more electronic control so people didn't kill themselves, and you had to kill the torque that was going to the wheels and correct for all the errors people were going to make because they had cars that were too powerful. But it's really reached the point, and I think electric cars have just taken it completely over the edge. And there's a part of me that thinks, well, I guess if you're, appealing to people's reptilian brain, faster is better because it is. So maybe that helps sell in electric cars, which broadly I think are, probably a good idea. But they're just too fast. I mean, I had just a regular Taycan 4S not long ago, and it was so fast that I really thought I was going to black out. And it was, there were two even faster ones available that you could buy from Porsche for a lot more money. But I seriously was like, I don't know how people could do this. And the old guys who are probably driving them, they will black out. I mean, it was akin to being strapped to the, like the front landing gear of an F-18 when it's taking off. It was just like, everything blurs and you get lightheaded and, you hope you don't run into the back of something when that's happening. So I had kind of more fun, I guess I subscribe to the old adage of I have more fun driving a slow car fast than a fast car slowly. So after they came and took the Porsche away today and left me a Mitsubishi Outlander, which I'm raring to get at, I instead drove a 1968 Lancia Fulvia Berlina, which was more my speed because you're really working it out to get up to highway speeds. But it's great, it's just a gem.
I totally agree with you on that. That's why I drive a 1990 Miata. Very very much in that same vein of slow car fast. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right about when I was in my younger days, I used to think that you can never have too much torque, and then I started driving some of these modern EVs, and it's like, yeah, you can have too much torque. It's when you can't actually use it.
Like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and now we're getting stuff like the Model S Plaid, and maybe someday even the next generation Tesla Roadster, which Musk wants to put SpaceX thrusters on there, cold air thrusters, and shoot that thing to 60 in 1 second. It's ridiculous.
It's an arms race, really, and that's I mean, the automobile industry has demonstrated for a long time that they love a good arms race, whether it makes sense or not, whether it comes back to bite them in the ass or not. They'll ante up.
Yeah, during Stellantis's EV day a couple of months ago, they acknowledged that we've pretty much done. I think we've done all we reasonably can with internal combustion with the Hellcat engines, and so now we're going to go electric so we can go even faster. It's just nuts.
I understand the impulse, and I think that's okay if that was part of their portfolio. But the way they've been talking in the last couple of weeks, it really sounds like that's all they're planning to do, and the idea of like sensible transportation. And I think that. I think the industry, has wrapped itself around, especially at Stellantis, the American companies have wrapped their heads around, the transition to electric power in a super hurry. And this is sort of the way that Dodge seems to have gotten there. But you got to, wonder if they realize that, making cars that go that fast, driving that fast, making cars that are so heavy because you need so many batteries because they go so fast that you use the power too quickly otherwise, and you have an unacceptable range. I mean, there's still, I would have thought, no matter how clean your power is, and we're nowhere close to having a clean electrical grid, that the idea of driving around 9,000-pound cars like the new Hummer or 9,500 that goes 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds or whatever. I mean, that's it may not be quite the same affront to the environment as a big block that was in its day, or, something much heavier. But it's still, it can't be the way forward overall for the world.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Anything else on the Macan, Robbie?
No, I think that is it. I also had a chance. I had a chance last year to drive that 718 Boxster. Oh man, I love that car. It's my best friend. I called it my best friend. That's what
Your new bestie, BFFs.
This is my new best friend.
Although it also reminds me what a great deal used Boxsters are. I mean, you can still get them. I've seen $6,000 first-gen Boxsters and $8,000, $10,000. But like, what a lot of performance, and pretty safe feeling car in a less bulky package. Not a terrible idea to spend some of that on the $40,000 you don't spend opting up your Macan on a used Boxster, and then taking $30,000 and going and have a good time.
Don't say anything, because people are gonna start putting them on Bring a Trailer, and that'll be the end of the inexpensive Boxsters.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that last week when we were in Napa. I was talking with Jason Fogelson. He's looking for some kind of fun project car, and the conclusion that several of us came to is probably a first gen Boxster would be his best bet. In terms of something reasonably affordable, at least to purchase, if not necessarily to buy parts for. That would probably be his best bet. So I think he's actually looking for one now. All right. Did you want to talk about this other vehicle you had listed here, Robbie?
I can talk about it in rather quickly because I've not had a chance to take it off road, which is sort of the whole deal with this. I have the Bronco, the Ford Bronco. I finally got behind the wheel of one, and 5 minutes behind the wheel, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I understand.
I get it.
I get it. It's big and ridiculous and off-roady, and it's like the Wrangler and a Defender had a baby, and they just slapped some Ford badges on it and called it a day. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to take it off road yet. It is the Badlands, which that's essentially its only job. Even though I'm pretty sure 85% of all the Badlands in the world will spend very, very, very little, if probably no time, actually going off road. It was one of those vehicles where if people came over and they're like, "You want to go drive from the Bronco?" and they're like, "Yes, we do." I have an XC40 right now, Recharge, the EV XC40, and they were a little less excited about that.
No,
That's
you're
odd.
kidding.
Yeah,
That's so
they were
weird.
kidding. So yeah, it is very it's people across the street have asked me about it. Yeah, it's one of those cars. A lot of people have been asking about it. I understand, and but it's also it's just ginormous. It is a lot larger
You
than
get the 4-door?
you anticipate. I don't know. I got the 2-door. It's just tall. It just
wow.
feels very It feels it's big and yellow, and it's fun to drive, but it still feels a bit like I feel like I'm driving a school bus. Sometimes. So it's, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to, sometime this week before I head off to Germany, I will take it off road, and I'm sure I will thoroughly enjoy it. My wife likes it, but it is also, it is not a plug-in hybrid or an EV, so it's sort of off the table for us as we're currently looking for a new something car.
Have you driven the
does it have to
Bronco, Jamie?
No, I haven't. I'm offended, but they haven't offered one up yet here to me in New York. I have driven the Bronco Sport, which was okay, but has obviously nothing to do with the regular Bronco. But I heard a lot of people saying nasty things about it, like my friends in the press. But I thought it was fine.
About the Bronco Sport, people are being nasty?
Yeah.
But I thought it was fine. It's not the same car as the Bronco. It's not intended to be that hardcore off-roady kind of car. So if that's what you're expecting, of course they're disappointed. But for what it's supposed to be, I thought it was great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as has probably occurred to you all, there's a living to be made by being perpetually grumpy. So
This is true.
All those people would have bought an Escape. Yeah, and when I drove there, they would bought an Escape, which is not a great. It's the Bronco Sport's so much better than the Escape. It has a little bit of.
I think that's right. It looks better, even if it's the same car. It looks to me it looks better, and if it helps people live that dream, without having to buy a real Bronco, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, the real Bronco's fuel economy numbers are a little bit startling in the year 2021.
They are pretty bad.
They're really bad for how it's a 4-cylinder engine that's getting 20 miles per gallon or something like that on a good day. That's pretty bad.
With the tailwind.
Yep.
Downhill.
Yeah.
In high range.
But I mean, granted, it does have the aerodynamics of a barn, so there's that.
I said it's kind of like a toaster, just like a little toaster.
Oh, it is like a little
perfect
toaster.
little square.
Happy little toaster.
Happy little toaster.
All right. Speaking of plug-in hybrids, I had one in the driveway since I returned from our little sojourn in California last week. The Volvo XC90 T8 Recharge Inscription. So this is the top end of the Volvo lineup. The XC90s, they're semi-large 3-row SUV. The third row is on the tight side. For a 3-row, it's adequate, but not exceptional. I've driven this thing several times over the last several years in various guises. The T6, the T8. I don't know if I've ever had a T5. So the T8 is the plug-in hybrid, where you've got the 2-liter 4-cylinder up front with a turbocharger and a supercharger for about 315 horsepower, and then another 100 horsepower electric motor on the rear axle, and a battery that, according to the EPA, gets you about 18 miles of electric driving range. Last time I had one, I managed to actually get it up to 21 miles before the engine kicked on. 100 horsepower from the electric motor is not a lot, but it's actually adequate for, cruising around town, and, as long as you don't accelerate away from stoplights too quickly. But even if you've got it in hybrid mode, the engine will come on for a bit and then it'll shut off once you ease off the accelerator. The inscription, the XC90, has a really lovely interior. Great materials, nice leather, nice wood. I still on the plug-in hybrids, they have a different transmission shifter than they do on the gas engine models. The gas engine models for now still have, traditional mechanical transmission shifter. The plug-in hybrids have an electronic switch for a shifter, and it's got this lovely looking crystal shift knob, stubby little shift knob. But the thing that has annoyed me ever since the first time I drove one of these about 3 years ago is when you go to put it from park into either reverse or into drive, you actually have to push it twice. If you do it just once, you'll end up in neutral, and then you take your foot off the brake and the car starts rolling. And so you have to remember to always hit it twice when you're going from park to either neutral or drive or reverse. And I don't understand why they did that.
No, it's not dual clutch.
Oh, that's it. You have to. So you're double clutching, except without a clutch.
You got to double clutch it. You got to double clutch it. That's how. Not a dual clutch. Double clutch.
The other thing that annoys me less than it used to, but still annoys me, is the Sensus infotainment system. So this doesn't yet have Volvo's new Android Automotive based system in it. It's the old one it's got the 9-inch screen, and you can swipe between 3 different pages, and it kind of changes modes as you do. If you swipe, if you have it on the media section, for whatever, if you're listening to the radio or listening to something on Android Auto or CarPlay, and then you swipe over and you go to get your vehicle information and then swipe back, then that disappears, and it's just kind of a pain to use. I just don't really like it. Fortunately, they have improved the performance of it over the years. It used to be a lot more laggy and slow than it is now, but it's reasonably fast now, but it's still not a good interface. But that's going to be going away next year when the replacement for this thing comes out, which is going to be all electric. There's going to be, as far as I know, no gas engine version of the replacement for the XC90. And this one that I had, what came out, it has the, base price on the XC90 T8 is $69,750. With the options on this one, which included the lounge package with the backrest massage front seats, $1,700 for that, and the advanced package with the heads-up display and the 360 surround view camera, another $1,500, and the Bowers and Wilkins premium sound system for $3,200, and a few other assorted options, came to a grand total of $81,690 delivered, and remarkably, even though it has to come all the way from Sweden, they only charge $995 for delivery. So it's a bargain compared to getting an F-150, which comes from about 20 miles away from me, and they charge you $1,800 for that one.
Was it? Why? It was 2000. There was something that just had a $2,000 destination. I can't remember what it was. Was it the Wagoneer?
Sounds about right.
I think it was. Yeah, I think the Wagoneer was up to $2,000.
Yeah, $2,000.
Yeah.
It came all the way from Sweden, and it's still
for less than the Wagoneer comes from here.
Yeah.
What do you think about current Volvos, Jamie?
I like them. I actually just spent 10 days with my youngest son going on a baseball park tour of sort of the area around New York. We went to Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and back in an XC40 Recharge. And I really liked it more than I thought I would. People, were really enthusiastic about not just the car and talking about it, but the color that they have. They have this new kind of sage green color that people were like stopping in traffic to ask about it. They were just like, I love that color. And it made me think about, why there ought to be more pastel paints. But I think that when there was a time not that long ago when pundits were saying, I remember reading several people in a piece in Automotive News where people were saying, there's really no reason for Volvo to exist now that, Audi is doing so great, and, there's BMW, there's no place for them to go, and, Ford can't figure it out, so they might as well just go away. And I felt that was, dumb, if they could make a decent car, that they, to get their reputation as being a safe brand, which, was founded in elements of reality. That would cost, tens of billions of dollars, if not more, to create that for yourself out of whole cloth. So I thought, everything that they've done since they were, taken over by Geely, has been in the kind of sensitive way that Geely has allowed them to engineer their own cars and, just do the things you would like to do if you could afford to do them, has been really good. And I think they've been rewarded with strong sales in the States, their best ever. And I think they're completely credible. And I, in general, I always feel like when there's an established brand that's done well, that falls by the wayside completely or is allowed to die, that it's, somebody really screwed up, because that's like, it's so hard to get into the car business now. If you have a going concern that ever, flirts with profitability, it's like, come on, somebody ought to be able to figure this out.
Yeah. It's a shame that, some brands like Saab, never quite did manage to figure that out. GM never, they couldn't figure it out on their own. And
GM has like Donald Trump-like properties of killing everything they touch. I think that it was really unfortunate. They, unlike Geely, I think they fundamentally misunderstood the brand, which is, I think Ford did a better job with Jaguar, albeit, they've got a lot of work left to do now. I think that, GM didn't understand what made Saab. And I mean, it was telling right away when they started laying off engineers and using Opals as the basis for Saabs, and then even lesser cars. And the telling thing is that I think what do they call them? The NCAPs, the European crash ratings. Mm-hmm. This first GM built a Saab went from the equivalent of like a 5 to a 2 in the crash test. And that, so that showed that they had really lost the plot right there. But then the layoffs and things like that. And of course, the ultimate insult was the 97X, the Chevy Trailblazer rebadged. And all the money went into the badges and moving the ignition key to the floor, which was, as a one-time Saab person, that was, probably the least important part of the Saab being a Saab. But they saved that and chucked the rest.
Yeah, Geely's kind of done the opposite with Volvo. They let them engineer their own stuff to do their own design, and then they've actually borrowed from that for some of the stuff that they're doing in China with Lynk & Co. and now Zeekr and some of their other brands. Oh, yeah. So they're leveraging the strengths of Volvo for the rest of their group instead of trying to force what they already had onto Volvo.
Right. You hear a lot of people talk about leveraging, those things and synergizing, but often that's exactly right. They do the worst thing. They throw out the good and double down on the bad. So, it gives me hope for companies like Lotus and London Taxi and other properties, iconic properties that they've acquired.
All right, so let's dive into some conversation. The reason why we had you join us this evening, Jamie, which is, well, first of all, because you're an incredibly interesting writer. I mean, I've been reading your stuff for many, many years in many different publications, and always enjoyed the way you put words together. And a great example of that is your latest article for the Road Rat about Elon Musk. Why don't you? What prompted you to write this article?
Well, basically, as I note in the article, I was a Musk agnostic. I mean, he seemed like, I don't expect much from, entrepreneurs in the way of being nice guys. And, he didn't seem like a very nice guy. But what he had achieved was hugely impressive. And the cars were great. I mean, I was, sort of vaguely troubled by the fact that the true believers were seemed like they were unwilling to admit that there was any possibly, less than perfect thing about Musk and Tesla cars. But to answer your question in a word, they asked me to write a story about it. So I immersed myself in everything I could read about Musk. I came away sort of where I started, which is that, he's a what I guess, was it Hegel or Kant called a world historical person, the people who, they're just the right guy at the right time, and they're just destined to be famous, and in his case, rich. And I think, he's a brilliant guy, but he's also, he's kind of a huckster. And I think that's sort of what the piece explores. I think that the surprising part to me is I had come around some years ago to going like, you got to give this guy a lot of credit for moving the whole electric car game along. And the Model S, for whatever problems it had, it came out of the box so well, and it was such an impressive piece of engineering. And he had really overcome the big hurdle with a bright idea about like what, how you would sell an electric car to the public, and how you would not lose your shirt doing it, and how it didn't have to be, a penalty box, in the way that, some economy cars were, and that, was a badge of honor for, your environmentalist types, but really didn't interest people who were going to spend money on cars. So, I credit him for that, and there's no question that the world is closer now to widespread adoption of electric cars than it was, and a lot of that, certainly some of it, has to do with him. So I applaud him for that. Less savory was the discovery, which I wasn't the first person to realize this, but as I paid more attention to it, you started to see a pattern where he was, very much in charge of his own narrative, and there were elements to it which were false, and which I guess overly stated his contribution to the technological side of the question, but also in the promises he made for his cars, the way he treated his workers, and the way that he was seen as a force for pure good with respect to the environment, which I don't think is as clear as some people think it is. And, the very fact of his notoriety and the way he operates in the world, wherein now he's been able to let go his press office and really isn't held to account by the press because he doesn't talk to them. And he has, very much in the fashion of Donald Trump, an army of online, supporters who will savage anybody who has anything critical to say about him, whether or not they're trading in facts or just the general bitterness of the automobile industry, which was, there was a lot of acrimony towards Musk, which, some part of which I would say was sour grapes. But it's also true that he hasn't been treated by the public or the government in particular as a car maker, and certainly the stock market, but more as a tech company, which it was, tech companies were already pissing off Detroit and other car makers long before it, because here are these people who didn't make any money necessarily, who were being rewarded with massive stock valuations, which were reflected in their personal incomes, while these guys who are running heavy industries were, doing, tens of billions of dollars of business and earning often billions of dollars in profits, and their shares were flat, their paychecks were flat or down. I mean, what a misery for them. So I think he caught a lot of guff from people who wanted to sit around and criticize him within the industry, but actually should have probably been paying more attention and getting their ships out to sea, the great electric car sea, sooner.
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting point. Obviously, I think they looked at Tesla and saw that they were certainly gaining some traction in the marketplace in terms of their sales growing, but until relatively recently, they had never had. Last year was the first time in their history that they had an annual profit, and whether or not you actually believe that they were in fact profitable is a whole other question that the article doesn't get into. And there's a lot of questions about their accounting practices. But the rest of the industry looked at it and said, yeah, they're selling stuff, but they're not making any money, and they're not selling that many compared to the whole industry. So let's just go keep doing what we're doing and not really invest a whole lot in this. Some companies, GM invested some with the Volt and then the Bolt, but it was still, relatively minor compared to, and they weren't doing things as out there as what Tesla was doing in terms of things like their electrical architecture and the charging networks and things like that to really try to build it up. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I mean, I think that, that's been a problem in the industry for, in my entire life. Probably, if you were to look back, back at least to the 1960s, where, senior management was really, they had a comfort zone. They know what had worked for them in the past, and that's what they try to do, and that's what they keep trying to do. But I think, they had a completely different hand they'd been dealt than Musk was. And Musk is a genius in that he was able to game the system to his advantage. One of the people I interview calls him, like one of the great rent seekers of our time. I looked that up in the dictionary, and it's basically somebody who, uses and manipulates government policy to benefit themselves financially, and that's really what Tesla did. So I think that in general, certainly General Motors being a good example, who could have owned the electric car space from the time of the EV1 on, and then had the Bolt gone differently. Even before they knew that they had a problem with their batteries, they were already backpedaling on that car. They didn't market it seriously at all. I think that they've been burned by taking chances in their minds in the past, going back to the days of the copper-cooled Chevrolet in the 1920s and the Corvair. The few times they've really tried to do something different, onto the four-wheel steering pickup trucks, it either, was proved some sort of embarrassment to them, and it didn't make them money. And then that dovetails with the growing and unfortunate tying of everybody's compensation to share price. and the absolute crazed, short-sightedness of most American corporations and in the world's corporations, sadly, that it made the long game that Tesla and Musk were playing very hard for them to even think about replicating. They could never get away with it. I mean, there were a lot of problems with Saturn, but there was a lot of success around Saturn, which sadly had nothing to do with the cars, but they ran away from that too. Because it just wasn't what they knew. There was politics internally that other things were being starved for Saturn's benefit. So it's very hard to this is my observation. I'm not an MBA or a former industry executive, but it seems like it's very hard to change an ingrained, large, highly political culture to do something you've never done before, that you don't really understand, and that your shareholders are not going to give you a chance to, the majority ones are not going to give you a chance to execute. So what's the point of having a 5-year or 10-year plan that's really a 10-year plan if you're going to be fired in year 2?
Yeah, that's a good point. Robbie, Nicole?
Yeah, I've covered Elon and Tesla for, entirely too long, which is anything more than 2 days. And yeah, there is a, when you talk to employees, both former and current, there is a sort of underlying acknowledgement, but not, they're not overtly, but acknowledgement of, well, Elon has this idea and we're just going to do it until either A, he changes his mind, or B, he forgets about it and we just go back to doing things the way it should be done. For a lot, and this is, when you talk about things that have to do with the press department, I mean, there's no longer a press fleet. If, everyone who's reviewing Teslas they're renting random owners' Teslas, which, probably isn't ideal. But if you just rent the Tesla on Turo and then you just take it to the track and you do a 0 to 60 run, boom, you got 1 billion views. You don't have to do an actual review anymore. You just have to make it go real fast. Mm-hmm. And so I think right now I think you talked about how they're playing a long game, but I think there's a lot of short-sightedness going on at Tesla, because I think they've played a long game and they've won with the help of a lot of, like you said, EV credits. But those, of course, Stellantis, the FCA's was a major contributor to that, and those are going away or have already gone away. And I think they're in a weird space right now because the vehicles they have out are out, and they still have this other, this Cybertruck that keeps being delayed, which is, just regular Tesla stuff's going to be delayed. But I think as in this sort of lull of new Teslas, everyone else is finally bringing out EVs, and there is a hunger for people to get an EV that isn't a Tesla just because they've been turned off by Elon.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right, and I don't mean to to just go like, well, they figured it all out. The long game, I think. I wouldn't say that they've entirely run out of ideas, but I mean, it's a fascinating situation because Musk has so many other distractions. I mean, everything he can think of, he can raise the money to do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, SpaceX is a phenomenal second career to have, on the boil while you have a first one running the world's largest electric car startup. I mean, I guess for the fortune of the good fortune of U.S. astronauts, they have other people who were, more traditional, in their business style running that, and their commitment to safety and things like that. Mm-hmm. I think Tesla has a lot of problems that are a function of Musk's, over-promising what he can do, what his cars can do, his idiosyncratic management style, the lack of a proper hierarchy and things like that. I think those are both they're double-edged swords. Mm-hmm. The great things about Tesla are because of, in some large measure because of Musk, and the unfortunate thing, but one of the interesting things I found talking to former Tesla employees was the idea that he's burning out on the job, and they read some of his more zany, tweets and things like that as being evidence of him wanting to just get pushed out of it so he can just declare victory and go on to his next thing. I mean, he always has a new project, and if they don't stick, he just goes away. Here, you have a situation where he's heavily invested. His whole fortune is tied, or most of his fortune is tied to Tesla. At this moment, it makes him incredibly rich. That could change. I mean, if you read about Billy Durant or other, of the great lunatics of the early days of the automobile, they were great until they weren't great. And then, Durant supposedly wound up running a bowling alley in Michigan. So what happens to Musk is a good question. What happens to Tesla? What happens if Tesla gets bought out by somebody else? What about Tesla that's good? Can they, besides the name, can they even save at that point? But the other thing that is a dark cloud, I think, is the fact that the government, certainly in the post-Trump era, is on their case a lot more than they had been. And my research suggested that, the Trump administration had really soft-pedaled their, all of the government's examination of Tesla fires, Tesla crashes, a pretty clear dishonesty in the way autopilot was marketed, right on from the fact that they called it autopilot, leading you to think that it was autopilot when in fact it really wasn't autopilot. Those could all really slow them down. And how much of that is a political decision in the White House, we don't know, or I don't know. And certainly how much was it a political decision of the Trump administration not to do that? I found fascinating the fact that Musk was completely on board with the Trump world when he refused to shut down his factories despite the orders of the California government to do so. And for a guy who's supposed to be a scientific genius to deny, that COVID was killing people, which he was essentially doing, seemed, kind of weird. And yet, we know he had secret meetings with Trump, and that stuff is really, it's hard to get government agencies to really come down on any manufacturer of any size. So it's not impossible to imagine that they chose to go easy on him.
Jamie, I kind of have a question for you, though. Looking at the overall tone of your piece, I know you've acknowledged that, he's sort of that sort of mad genius kind of character that he is. But overall, you have 6 points to consider about the Techno King. You call him the Techno King.
No, he calls himself the Techno King.
Or he calls himself the Techno King, and you refer to him that way. But they're all pretty negative. Like, he's not so innovative, he's not so safe, he's not so green, not so innocent. It's a long series of negatives. And although I know, there are a lot of negatives that you can point out about him and about what he's done, and you acknowledge, he's got SpaceX going on, and, he's helped move EVs forward by the cult of personality that he is, but that you said that other automakers weren't able to make that happen. They're hamstrung by the constraints of being a General Motors that has 9 million bureaucrats that need to approve every move that they do. Was it really a bad thing if he managed to do what he did, even if what he did was sort of in an unconventional way? Like, if not for him, would be still 6 years back in terms of EV adoption and the push for EVs?
It's a fair question. I don't think that everything he did was necessary to do that. I don't think he had to say that his cars were going to work on autopilot when they couldn't. I don't think it was necessary to, treat his workers badly, make people work through a pandemic, or many of those things. I don't think it was necessary for him to take credit for, inventing Tesla, writing the other guys kind of out of the history who were the real founders of the company. none of all the stuff I cite as negatives, I think they're negatives. And I guess my point is that if you were to take a fair assessment of the man, that you would include those things. And I think some of those things, they haven't helped the business. One of the two revelations that I think probably were the most newsworthy in the story have to do with the idea, which is extremely popular on the boards with the Tesla stand, is the idea that he's trying to help other people electrify their model lineups, when in fact I interviewed people who told me that he discouraged them from electrifying, didn't want to share technology with them, encouraged them to instead save the money and buy the tax credits from him, which floated his company. So he could have been more helpful that way. And also with regard to...
were any of those guys willing to go on the record, or were they all anonymous?
They were off the record.
So nobody would really say who they were okay.
Well, they did. I knew who they were. They did.
Well, I know you know who they are.
No, they didn't want to go. They didn't want to go on the record because, as I point out in the story, every single person I talked to, save one, I think, were like, I don't want to be on the record. There is absolutely no, quote, upside to be seen as criticizing Musk or praising him. One of the guys I cite is the guy who runs the website Electrek. He said he'd written over, I think, 7,500 stories about Tesla and Musk. 95% of them were favorable. And he wrote a story that was fact-based about fires in stationary Teslas, and he got death threats from Tesla people, just on the basis of, Sam saying some things about me coming on the show to talk about Musk, and them not having read the magazine story, but piecing together the idea that maybe it says something bad about him. I was getting hate emails and tweets and things like that about it. So it is an unusual situation. But I guess all I would ask people is not, we don't have to condemn him. I don't regret that Tesla exists. I don't say I do. But I think that, he's not a god. I think that people put a lot of faith in the guy who figures out the game, first. So, people put a lot of faith in Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. And, they had a lot of really bad ideas. And when they spread them to other areas, they were, they not only weren't necessarily profitable or successful, but, they were fairly hateful and, were bad for the people who worked for them, and they were bad for the society. And I think that Musk is in danger of doing that. If you look at what he talks about.
But do you think he's more in danger? Do you think what he's doing for society is going to be overall, if you had to, take the scales of justice out there, that there's some negative? It's not like it's all in favor, but do you really think that it's the net effect here is, even when you take things like autopilot's name being misleading?
I think it's...
Do you think the net effect is a negative effect in the end?
I think that, as I said in the story, that I think that as with all of these sort of historical industrial giants, it's gray. I mean, the best that it can be is gray. And that, there's a lot of chapters left to be written, and it will be interesting to see how he deals with them. But, personally, I think it's great on some level that he's going to have 24,000 satellites in low orbit around the Earth in a few years with our government's help. It will make him, indescribably rich. He's barely describably rich as it is. And, maybe he's moved by a desire to bring internet communication to people in the hinterlands. But at the same time, that's a lot of space garbage to worry about. And there's a lot of language in the Starlink, that's his satellite company's agreements with customers, that are kind of off point, but they have to do with like who he has to listen to once he gets to Mars, which is what he's trying to fund. That's his big play, he says. is to get to Mars himself and to get man to Mars. But he basically, in that, rejects the world's governments as having anything to say with what he, can get up to on Mars.
Well, that's like the plot of every science fiction
history
it is. That's ever been out there, is that Martians want to be Martians, Venetians want to be Venetians. Nobody wants to be tied to what's on Earth. So that just who wants to be tied to a government that's just a continent if you're on a planet,
Well, yeah, I guess, but I guess I'm one of the lucky few who doesn't go to sleep at night thinking about how awesome it's going to be when I'm on Mars. But
Mars is not awesome, by the way. Like, you show up in Mars, you're wearing a spacesuit, you're still getting pummeled by radiation. It is not the utopia that Musk and others have made it out to be. It is a harsh,
the way you said that, Roberto, it's like you've been there. You're like, it's not as cool, guys. I was there.
I was there last week. It's really crappy. It is it is not the utopia that Musk likes to make it out to be. It is not the savior.
He calls himself the Imperator of Mars,
which is hilarious.
Well, it is hilarious, but he's also trying to go to Mars. So there's a part of me called me old-fashioned, but if I had $150 billion and the philanthropic thing I was doing was trying to get myself to Mars, I can't help but wondering whether somebody wouldn't say, well, maybe there's something better you could do with all that money. Maybe you could vaccinate the world or something like that. If you're really,
I don't know. Like, we had a president once who thought it was pretty cool to go to the moon, and we all liked him way back in the day. We're going to go to the moon and do the other things, and the moon was crazy.
There were a lot of people who weren't that enthusiastic about going to the moon, but sure, that's great. He was an elected president. He was doing it. He wasn't using he was using taxpayer dollars, but by people who voted for him, not. So
is that better or worse? At least Musk is using money he found a way to get somehow.
Well, it's all space.
Still taxpayer money.
It's all
no one voted for Musk.
Yeah.
I might have.
Was
he an option? Because at this point.
that's a minor point. But I think, people can obviously think and do what they want. He's not going to listen to me. I think that, I'm generally suspicious of people whose followers attribute godlike properties to them and act like they can't do any wrong, and that they don't have this actual record of things that they're doing and how it's affecting people. Everybody is hypocritical to one degree or another. I think he is a world-class hypocrite in that, on the one hand, you're telling people that, everybody's got to get an electric car because that's how we're going to save the planet. But I won't share my technology with other companies. I won't share my charging network, which would make owning an electric car more palatable to a lot of people. And at the same time, I'm going to be basically offering rich people rides to Mars, which is probably not the most environmentally friendly thing to do. And I'm championing Bitcoin, which is an incredible energy suck and not, regulated in the slightest as a currency or as, a use of electricity and, causing pollution, then changing your mind about whether you were for it while still going to Mars. They're all, and then changing it back again a month later. He's a mercurial guy. He's having a laugh sometimes, I'm sure. He's a nut, he's brilliant. So I just think when you're profiling somebody, if you want to take their full measure, you talk about the bad things along with the good things, and that's what I set out to do.
To go back to what you were saying earlier about, could he have done some of these things without being the kind of person that he has been? I'm wondering, like for Tesla, for example, over their history, particularly over the last 10 years, they have numerous times been on the verge of insolvency. And after they did their initial public offering in 2010, they said that Musk said that they would never have to raise capital again. They would be able to self-fund themselves going forward. And since that time, they have done, I think, 13 capital raises and raised something on the order of about $18 billion from the capital markets. And a big part of that is because despite being a money-losing enterprise, he's had these fans that have been willing to, every time they need money and they go out and sell more shares of the company, they've been willing to put money into that and pump up the price of that stock. If he hadn't behaved the way he has, with employees and with all the other things he's done, do you think he could have built up that kind of fan base that would have given him all that money over the last 10 years that has allowed the company to get to this point? So do you think it actually could have survived if he hadn't done that?
I couldn't say honestly, how it would have gone. I think you make an excellent point that they've almost been insolvent, and the way out of that he's pulled a rabbit out of his hat by promising something that didn't happen at all, or it didn't happen when he said it was going to happen. And he's mesmerized, a part of the investment community along with just the sentient population. I think that, it's all closely intertwined, but, I think part of it is the way that the stock market responded to the tech boom. And I think that was, partly owing to him, but also partly owing to the fact that he was doing something new, that the market did not use its ordinary metrics for evaluating what he was doing. And that's, one of the things that makes car makers so jealous, conventional car makers. But promises and, relatively small successes mean a lot, apparently. I think people have, there's a sense that the world is changing and people want to be there. And he certainly seems like a change agent. I don't think you can argue anything but that he's a change agent, and people want to be there.
All right. Any other thoughts on Elon and Tesla before we move on?
I have so many thoughts, but we'll be here for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I've written articles that have been extremely critical of Elon, and then friends who have tweeted about it have been attacked by Elon, and then his fans where they've gotten death threats, and he doesn't care.
I don't think that he doesn't care. I think that anytime you're that public of a figure, and whether people like you or hate you, and whether you're saying good or you're saying something bad, you will get hate mail, death threats.
It is a completely different level versus anyone else I've ever covered. I've been covering tech, which means I've been covering a lot of very narcissistic individuals, and you. At some point, you have to take a bit of responsibility for the cult of personality that you've built around yourself, and Elon has not done that.
I guess you do, but what do you do? Take away the keyboard from people that you think said something in your defense that he said something that was really snarky.
No, but you can temper the attacks that have been happening to individuals, including journalists, and especially female journalists, which at one point he was very adamant about going after for a while. He never said boo to me, but he went after a female journalist who was tweeting my article.
Yeah, he's gone after people like Laura Kolodny from Bloomberg and Lynette Lopez and many other female journalists that have written about him. I mean, I've been writing about Tesla for almost 15 years, and I've been on the receiving end of a lot of that hate. Fortunately, never any death threats. But I've gotten a lot of negative feedback from his fans.
Go back to your question.
I've gotten negative feedback and death threats for things that have nothing to do with Elon Musk, that are much smaller scale things that when the right rabid fan gets their hands on it, all of a sudden, you get exactly the kind of things you hear that women don't want to have to deal with on the internet that have nothing to do with Elon. I'm just saying it's not exclusively an Elon thing. And those people aren't the ones responsible for what their fans do. You can't hold them responsible.
Well, there's a lot of misogyny, especially in people who follow the automobile industry and cars generally. That's unquestionable. But I do think that I agree with the fellas here that there's something people can do. I mean, and that's why I think the comparison to Trump is apt. Not Trump is a much worse person in my view, and has done much more harm to the society. But it is a similar thing where you're not accountable, and your people are, whatever he does, I'm for it. I don't care if it contradicts what he did last week or what I said yesterday. I'm for it. And there is a way to deal with it, which is you see somebody do something like that, and you call them out. And you either privately or publicly, point out that they've gone out of bounds. That was not that. You're right that in almost every sphere that there are people who are going to say and do inappropriate things, but better organizations and better people, they don't allow things to be done in their name that are just terrible. I mean, when I mean, not that I'm a huge fan, but when the woman at the debate between John McCain and Obama started spouting some idiocy about Obama being, a Muslim from, far from Africa, and John McCain, in his supporters' face was like, "You're wrong, ma'am. That's just not true." And that, he was hailed at the time for, that being courageous. But I think that's the sort of thing that anybody should do in that circumstance. Is like, don't let people lie on your behalf, and don't let people make violent threats to people who have just expressed their opinion, especially when when you don't defend yourself, to let these people go out and then just not have any agency for the fact that you've essentially sicked them on somebody. That's a cop-out at the very least.
All right. On that note, let's shift the conversation a little bit. One of the questions we got from a listener that I put it up today was to ask you, Jamie, about your car collection. I know you've got a number of older vehicles. Why don't you tell us about what you have, and what you've had and what you have today, and if there's anything you'd like to have.
Yeah, I mean, I have too many cars now, and I had even more too many cars before my children went to college. Right now I'm on a pretty heavy Peugeot gag. Not gag. What is the word? Oh hell, I'm blanking out.
I know the word you're thinking of, and I can't think of it either right now. But
Jag. It's a Peugeot Jag.
Yes.
So I'm really loving those. I guess I should just start by saying I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in the town of Leonia, New Jersey, which was the headquarters for British Leyland. So I got, as a young person, I got a really warped idea of what cars people would drive around in. There's like 500 people who worked at this place in a town of 6,000 people. So there was an inordinate amount of MGBs and Triumphs and Jaguars and Land Rovers. And I saw the Range Rover prototype when I was on my bicycle when I was 7 or something like that, and all kinds of things like that. So I started out pretty much as an automotive Anglophile. And so I've owned MGs and Triumphs and Jaguars and a bunch of Lotuses, and I still have a Lotus Cortina, and I have a 1936 Riley Kestrel for the real oddballs out there. I have been into Volvos and Saabs, and I have none now. And what else? Haven't had a lot of German cars, but admire them a lot. Never owned a Porsche. And I'm really into Lancias and Peugeots, and I have a 68 Travelall. That's kind of my work truck, an International, and I have a 92 Oldsmobile Silhouette, which I bought at the height of the pandemic. from a fellow in Palm Springs without sight unseen. Um, I should mention that in my copious spare time, I run a picture car business. We work on a lot of TV shows supplying cars. So I can often deduct the prices of the cars and rent them out to movies. And so that, in part, um, played a role in my buying the Oldsmobile Silhouette, which you'll remember as the Cadillac minivans from Get Shorty.
Yeah.
But it was it's been in the TV show Dr. Death, which is just out now, and paid for itself. So what I would like to get, I guess I've reached an age where there's not that much new stuff that or new old stuff that I want to get. Nothing that I've sold, has I've lost a lot of sleep over. So I can't really, probably some other French or I'd like to get a Matra D-Jet and an R10 Gordini or something like that. But I still have a hankering for another Lotus Elan. The new, what is the name of the new Lotus, the mid-engine, not the
The Emira? Is it Emira?
Emira? That looks pretty great to me. I really like the Evora a lot. I like, 928s are looking good to me. Porsches, I don't know why. But
There's something cool about the 928.
oh yeah, they're cruisers. My son just bought one for $1,300 that he managed to get running, and it's pretty great. So that's a real value proposition. I've been fortunate that some cars I own went up in value, and I was able to sell them. That kind of saved my bacon during the recession. But things get too expensive. It scares me, and I kind of want to not either get out of them or not. I can't afford to go there, So there's a lot of things that used to appeal to me that I'll never, ever, I remember my dad one day when I was probably like 10, we had a neighbor who had a DB4 Aston that was perfect that somebody had given him as a present. He had some rich friend, and he offered it to my dad for $1,500, and he was like, "Yeah, what would I do with that?" And then this next day, a kid at the local Shell station offered him a 289 Cobra for $2,000, which was cheap even then. And he was like, "No." And so, there was a day in like right before the crash in the late '80s where had he bought them, it would have been a $3,000 investment, would have become worth over $1 million. And I'll never own either of those cars, although I wouldn't mind it.
What got you into cars in the first place?
It's unclear. I know my parents brought me home from the hospital in an MGA Roadster that they had bought and gone around Europe.
That's probably it. The fumes from that probably infected your brain.
Definitely part of it. No seatbelts, no nothing, and lead gasoline, of course. But they had gone long after they had been married, but before they had any children, on a trip to Europe, and where they had bought this MGA. And I heard that story a lot. And for whatever reason, it really resonated with me. It just seemed like such a fun and exciting thing to do. So by the time I was, supposedly the first word I spoke was, we were driving up the East Side Drive, and I saw a Volkswagen Beetle, and I said, "Volksen driving." So I was car obsessed after that, and it sort of just outstripped my parents. And I bought my first car when I was 12. Was an old MGA for $50 with 4 friends, and we fixed it up. And but it never got it running. And then some guy came and wanted to buy the back half of it and gave us like $100. So we were like, "Oh wow, sure." Now that would seem like sacrilege, but so I've always been into it, and I've probably owned well over 100 cars, if not 150 cars. But I have I have a Mark II Jag that I've owned since 1987. That's the one I've had the longest, though not necessarily the one I'd keep if I had to get rid of them all. I think I would still keep an MGA, which I have, and I would probably keep a Lancia Fulvia. They're kind of my two favorite cars. I once interviewed, oh God, oh no, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. He's the guy who designed the Range Rover or engineered the Range Rover, and British guy, just died a few years ago. It would be a much better story if I remembered his name. But you'll find it.
Jerry McGovern?
No. This is he goes back to the 50s, yeah, and 60s. Oh my gosh. In any case, he I was really excited to meet him, and I had asked him. We were on a 3-day rally together. What his favorite car had been in his life, and he said it was an MGA coupe. Which I felt vindicated in by. Oh man, he also worked on the Triumph Dolomite Sprint. He's remained through the early Leyland years, but he was. Rover engineer. I don't know. Let's see if I can figure this out. This will drive me nuts. Hopefully, you'll edit this part out.
Charles Spencer King?
That's it.
David Bash?
Yeah.
Charles King? Or
yeah,
Bash?
But what was his nickname is?
Spen
King, yes, that's the guy.
Yeah.
He died in a bicycle accident, ironically, in England. But yeah, lovely guy. He was fascinating too. He was really pissed off with Land Rover at that point because he felt like there was a lot of things they could do in the area of suspension to make Defenders less rough riding, and he was also an enemy of giant A-pillars, which he felt blocked people's vision, which are subjects that are still near and dear to my heart. So yeah, I guess one of the things about my Peugeot obsession currently is that I really like cars that ride well, and I can't really understand why the current generation of car buyers seems to have forgotten everything that we knew about how to make cars ride well. You know, the whole obsession with bigger wheels and tires, when that we know that makes for a worse riding car. And I think a lot about what autonomy will do to what, how sophisticated suspensions are. Does it really matter if you're not driving what a car, if it has no steering feel, what's going to make a car sporty versus one that's not? I would put it out to you guys, does it really matter if it's riding on an antique SUV chassis or something, more modern?
Well, I think when we get to that stage, what we probably will want to pivot back to comfort, because I don't see most of those vehicles driving in a really sporty manner. I think when people want to have that kind of sporty feel, they're going to want to drive themselves as opposed to be driven. And so I think we may see a shift back to that more plush ride, plush but well controlled, which is, I think, one of the differentiators. Older American cars were often plush, but they were also floaty and
Right.
moving around a lot, and what you want is a balance of, you want minimized body motion, but you want to absorb the road so you're not really feeling it.
Right. So,
go ahead, Robbie.
Oh, so yeah, we need to go back to smaller wheels and larger sidewalls. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know it looks cool. That's the entire reason. That's it. That's the only reason we have these giant wheels, and it looks way cool. But it's sort of ruining the ride for a lot of these luxury vehicles.
It was funny. I was at the GM Proving Ground once and was getting driven around in the old 1930s Buick Y-Job, and which was like so cool. But when we got out to look at it, it had 13-inch wheels. And I was like, why did they do that? And he was like for ride. And then we got into the Escalade with the 22-inch dubs, and it rode like shit. And he was like, the thing that was funny was that the guy was like, oh yeah, they're terrible. But my observation from the outside was that for several years, car makers were just like, you know what, we're not going to sell you 20-inch wheels because it'll diminish the ride and handling of this car. And finally, after about a minute, the dealers were like, I'll sell you 20-inch wheels. And then, the car makers were all just like, oh, the hell with it. Like, here you go. Here's your 20-inch wheels.
Mine.
Ian Callum, when we went on the first walk around the I-Pace, he just sort of said, yeah, I know, the wheels are too big. That's what people want. They can live with them. That's the problem with giving the people what they want.
You give them what they want.
Yeah. It originally, going to bigger wheels originally started with the need to have clearance for bigger brakes. You wanted, better braking performance. And that was fine if they had stopped, at like 15-inch,
Just better and bigger and bigger and bigger.
And now, 18, 19, 22, 24-inch wheels. It's crazy. Although, think cars like the Shelby GT500, that's got 15-inch brake rotors to begin with. So you've got to have big wheels.
Well,
to
and
those
in
things.
fairness, there's something to choose between different car makers. Some do better jobs of accommodating absurdly large wheels than others. The worst case scenario is where they're just like, okay, let's just slap on some bigger wheels, and that's it. But I used to have a Mini Cooper that I felt when I put Steelies and snow tires on it, it rode significantly better than it did on the bigger wheels with run flats, which was sort of distressing to realize.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
As the world shifts towards electrification, one of the interesting trends of the last 10, 15 years has been the concept of restomods, taking these old classic cars and putting modern hardware in them, modern engines, modern brakes, suspension. So, you've got that classic look, that vintage look, but it drives like a more modern car. And now, we're starting to see, there's been people that have done electric conversions on old cars, especially old VW Beetles and Porsche 911s. Those are popular ones for this. But what do you think about the idea of electrifying some of these old classic cars?
I have no problem with that. I guess I would be the sort of person who, if I could afford something like that, would want to preserve the old car so it could be restored to its running form. But I drove for a story, I drove the E-Type that Jaguar had converted into electric power, and I had driven E-Types and owned one once, and I thought it felt a lot like an E-Type. I missed the engine noise, but it was very fast and it was very pleasant. And so, if people can afford it, that's what they want to do. I don't really have a problem with that. In general, with resto mods, I'm for reversible changes. I know in the picture car business, it's maddening because you're looking for a bunch of 73 GM stuff, and you find a bunch of cars, and then they all turn out to be on 20-inch rims, and they're unusable. I mean, it totally kills the period vibe. And frankly, I think most things look best the way they were originally styled to be. So I would, I don't think I'm going to be doing any resto mods myself. One guy was talking to me about an interesting project, though, recently. He, when Saab had to get rid of their two-stroke in the 96, forgive me if I go deep into anorak territory here, but they were looking for a V4 that would fit and be more powerful. And they originally approached Lancia about using the Fulvia engine, but it turned out to be too expensive. And they used the Ford V4 from Europe, which was a pretty coarse engine and not that powerful. So his idea is to build a Saab 96 with the Lancia Fulvia engine. And that's the kind of resto mod I can get behind.
Yeah, that would be fun. And the reason I asked, because one of the things we're starting to see is car makers that have traditionally offered crate engines for people doing, either restorations or resto mods or racing vehicles, track vehicles. They're now starting to offer electric conversion kits, or at least they've announced them. Last year, GM did a concept. They took an old Chevy K5 Blazer and put a Chevrolet Bolt electric motor in it. They put an adapter on there so it bolts up to the hydromatic transmission. Put the Bolt battery pack in the back of the Blazer, and they announced plans to offer this kit with the power electronics and the wiring and the motor and everything to do these kinds of modifications. A couple of weeks ago, during the Woodward Dream Cruise, Ford announced tweeted out that they were going to launch the Ford Illuminator package from Ford Performance, which is an electric motor, which is presumably going to be, they haven't given details yet. They said they're going to have more details at SEMA in November. But I'm guessing that this is probably going to be one of the electric motors that they're using for the F-150 Lightning, modified, so that it can be installed in a variety of different vehicles. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they do this. I think the big challenge installing the motors is fairly straightforward for the most part. The big challenge with most of these cars is where do you stuff the batteries, and sure. I'll be curious to see what kind of solutions they come up with for that, because that's it's hard to package those and figure out where to put them, to balance the weight out, and how to do the battery management system for stuff like that.
Yeah, and related safety issues and things like that. I think there's a growing recognition in the old industry that they need as many revenue streams as they can think of going forward. And if it makes them money and helps them stay in business, it seems relatively benign to me. I think that there will be gasoline cars around for a long time, certainly once we're gone. But, I think that there's a whole world that it's almost hard to imagine, that's going to exist in the completely electric sphere, which will be retrofitting cars to do that. But also, when you think about the hot rodding possibilities with, chips and computers and more batteries and, more motors and things like that, bigger motors, generations of misspent youth away,
I'm still holding out. Oh, sorry. I'm still holding out hope that I can buy my first car, which was a '69 Datsun 2000 that my friend now owns. That he has removed the engine out because he bought another one that he wanted to put the engine in. So he bought mine he bought mine, then bought another one because the other one, the body was straighter, and but the engine was kind of crap on that one. I want to buy that car back, and this is like a 10-year quest so I can make it so I can do a resto mod EV out of an old roadster. All I need is like 60 miles of range. I'm not going to go anywhere. I just want a convertible EV. That's all I want in the world. It doesn't
need to be practical in any way.
It does not need to be practical in any way whatsoever. And I think a lot of people have been salvaging engines out of Leafs and getting battery packs from Teslas and stuff like that. So I like the idea that you can just buy a new one, which is nice. I think a Mach-E or a Lightning motor, though, probably a little too powerful for a car that weighs about 12 pounds.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I think one of the other day I actually tweeted out something about this. I think John Volker had posted something about it, and I suggested that GM's new Ultium batteries, because one of the interesting things GM's done with the batteries for their new EVs is they've incorporated the battery management system into the individual modules instead of at the battery pack level. Mm-hmm. So the idea is you can reprogram them so you can mix and match ones with different cells, different chemistries, and balance them out in software. And if I copied Mark Royce on that and said, what do you think, Mr. Royce? Would this does this sound like something you might do? And he actually liked the tweet. So maybe that's the direction that GM's going to go with their crate motor packages, is use the Ultium modules and offer sell individual modules so that you can take those, because they're smaller than a full battery pack.
Yeah,
you can take those and stuff them in somewhere in the car.
stuff them in random spots. I'm already I'm like, okay, I got to put some in the trunk, but I don't want it to be back heavy. So there's some in the passenger area and then a few up front. So you're running like wires back and forth in order to.
Just everywhere you look, there's a little bit of battery.
Yeah, there's a little bit of battery here, a little bit of battery here, a little bit of battery here. Anywhere there's space, you got to redo the suspension because now it's going to be all bogged down. But I think it can happen.
You wonder about some of the new technologies that I was reading a while back about the idea of the external airbag, that your car will sense it's about to hit a pedestrian or somebody, that will set its airbag off so that they'll. Yeah, I mean, if a modern Silverado hit you, I don't know how many airbags it would take to.
Because then you're just bouncing away. I mean, you're still getting hit by something.
Yeah, that's face high and 7,000 pounds.
But at least then it's the pavement that's killing you and not the Silverado.
Yeah, I guess. That's right. And also, what happens if like a tumbleweed? Because there's some large tumbleweeds comes out, and all of a sudden that just shoots off.
I think there was that bicycle helmet. Did you see that? That when it. That it became an airbag too. That was pretty. That was pretty cool. I had a near-death scooter experience when I was sent to test an electric scooter, Chinese brand. I don't even remember the name, but it was perfectly great. And I was riding actually to go pick up my MGA at the local gas station where, it was one of those like upright scooters, not like a motor scooter, but like a razor scooter that went 27 miles an hour. And the front fork collapsed, and I was thrown from it at 27 miles an hour. And it was like the only time I ever went out without my helmet. And I managed I did just like muscle memory to keep my head off from scraping the pavement. But I screwed myself up so much that I wish I had airbags. And it was a drag. It turned out I had been I'd been releasing it from the collapsed position in the wrong way, so it was really. I told the company I wasn't sure, and they were like, "Well, it's kind of your fault," and I was like, "Well, you would say that," and then they showed me the part of the owner's manual that I hadn't read, and I was
RTFM.
They were like, "But just so there's no hard feelings, we'll send you our new, even faster model."
Yes, please.
And we'll lock the fork in place.
There's times because I'm happy to ride a bicycle, but I just
here's the faster one.
Well, that was the thing when people were like saying Segways were going to take over the world. I mean, Segway weighed a lot, and if you think about people riding on sidewalks at 15 miles an hour on Segways, like how many people were going to be hurt by that, the more you know about the automobile industry and the more you think about people, it's like so many things people invent have so many inherent dangers that people really don't want to talk about. Today marked a great day in history because Algeria became the last country to sell leaded gasoline to the driving public, although the whole world still uses it for propeller planes. Which is probably not necessary and bad for you. But I mean, just like, that would be one example. But the correlation between speed and injury, I mean, human beings have really plumbed in ways that nobody ever thought of for the longest time. So, I'm pro electric car, but I guess I think about like, well, what is it that we're not thinking about that is going to be really a big problem with all this stuff?
Unintended consequences.
Yeah, the unintended consequences. What might they be? I mean, you can see the materials and whether they're properly recycled is a real issue. I like to tell people who are critics, well, they'll recycle them properly, but we've never recycled anything properly. So that's probably optimistic. Fires, I mean, there's gasoline car fires every day, but, at least you can pour water on them. So battery fires might be more difficult, and they might have to have fire suppression systems built in that are capable of dealing with them quickly. I'm sure the list goes on.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be plenty of issues that we've got to deal with, including the aforementioned grid you talked about earlier. We've still got lots of stuff to sort out there with just how we're going to get all the energy for these EVs. Why don't we wrap up with a couple more listener questions, and then we'll let you go, Jamie. Sure. Bryn Barenhausen asks, I think you've all made it clear that you are in favor of the electrification transition and understand the need for it, climate change, etc. So do you ever feel guilty reviewing the gas guzzlers, large SUVs, pickups, anything from Dodge, or is that just part of the part of the job?
I have no guilt whatsoever reviewing the things that are out there.
Anything
Zero,
from
none.
Dodge.
Well, you go.
Oh,
I did. I never feel guilty. So there we go. I'm like, I love driving that stuff. I'll drive it as long as they make it. Sorry. So no guilt. Zero guilt.
I think I do have a tinge of guilt based on some of the cars that are out there, and I'm like, hey, this is a good car. But it's also, where is electrification at when it comes to a lot of these vehicles? Like, does it fill in? Is it capable of filling in the need for that vehicle? And right now, for many of those vehicles, it doesn't. It doesn't really fill it in. But I think that plug-in hybrids, do fill in that need. It's and I think there's that it comes down to the automakers make these large gas guzzling cars because they make a lot of money. These cars make a ton of money for them, and they sell a lot of them. And that's why, as we see the transition to electrification, people are selling SUVs. They're selling small SUVs. It's a growing market. They're not selling small sedans. They're not selling station wagons, which would be perfect for an SUV because they're long. They have a lot of room for a battery, but they also have better. You can get better drag coefficient out of them. Nope. People want SUVs for whatever reason. And so I think individually as a human who lives in California and is watching, the state burn, 6 months out of the year, I do have a bit of a tinge of guilt. But at the same time, whether or not I review these or not, they are going to be purchased. That's the other thing. And I think there is a truth. As I talk to people and I tell them, like, buy your big giant truck. And this is something I've been saying for years. Buy your big SUV, buy your big thing that you want to take to the lake and drag your motorcycles or your jet skis or whatever. But really look into, try an EV. I think people, once they drive one, I think that really changes their mind about what EVs are. Just drive it for like 5 miles because it's not what you think it is. It's a lot of fun to drive. And I think that second car should be an EV for most people. And I've written this article before and I've been, sort of beating the drum. You're going to buy the big giant truck. You're going to buy the big gas guzzling whatever because that's you, and that's so America. Nothing more American than buying something that you really don't need for something that's never going to happen, but you're ready. But also, look at that. I think for me, it has been like very much like, okay, you're going to buy this. I can't stop you. I'm going to tell you which one's the best. But I'm also going to tell you, you should go out and you should try an EV, and you should make that your second car, because that second car is going to be the one you're going to drive all the time, because you just want to run to the store and you don't want to try to park your F-250 like super cab at the Target when you can just park your ID4, go in, go out, and get on with your life. So I think I balance it out by sort of edutainment and telling people, hey, you know what? Drive an EV. It's cool. Do it. Come on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It does tickle my lizard brain, driving, really fast cars and trucks. My logical brain knows that, most of these vehicles are ridiculous, but as you said, people are going to buy them.
Because they're fun.
And, we're going to, we try to help people understand, what are they getting, for their money. I've always, as long as I've been doing this stuff, when people ask me, what to buy, I always start with a series of questions about what their use case is. What are they going to do with it? And, try to help guide them in the right direction. It, rarely works. They usually are looking more for affirmation of what they've already decided on, but I at least try to guide them in that direction. And now we're getting to the point where there's a whole bunch of new EVs coming to the market. I'm increasingly comfortable in recommending to people that they at least consider these vehicles, go out and, if they can, test drive them, see what they're like, because I think that as you said, in the vast majority of cases, an EV with 250 to 300 miles of range is going to meet 99% of their needs, and for the rare occasion when they might need something else, go rent something.
Right. I sort of sidestepped that problem personally by writing the first anti-SUV op-ed piece for the New York Times in 1994. And I stopped getting invited to car launches for quite a while. And then basically my magazine was like, we're not going to send you to drive that because you'll just hate it. And so, I sort of was forced to take a more open-minded view of them and evaluate them for what they were. But it raised a lot of issues. But going back to something you both said, people call me all the time and would go like, oh, I know you're going to hate me, but, we really are digging this Ford Excursion. And I'd be like, well, for why? And they're like, oh, we have 2 kids and, it's like we might go away somewhere. And you're like, well, I remember when people used to get in a Beetle with 5 kids in the back seat and go on vacation, so I know it can be done, but often they would get them and then they'd be sick of them quickly because they felt embarrassed and they were clumsy and things like that. SUVs got a lot better. So that's one thing that makes me, I've gotten, driven SUVs that get 37 miles per gallon. And when that's happening, if they were a car, if it was a station wagon, which I'd prefer, they got 40 miles per gallon, 42 miles per gallon, that would be better. But, at that point, I think it's not, like whatever. In general, I have a concern with the idea, well, it's like what people want and what, we got to give the people what they want. And people want a lot of things, that they shouldn't do. And I'm not advocating that you outlaw things like that, but I would tax things based on their consumption differently in an ideal society that would reflect what they were doing to other people's health, to the roads, to the off-roads with these much heavier vehicles, in the way that trucks are taxed much more heavily and could be the whole tax policy could be done differently. I think people want to people want to drive drunk. They want to have sex while they're driving. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. People go, oh, well, that's where they make all their money. Well, you can make money selling, drugs to school children too. You make lots of money, but like that doesn't mean you have to do it. I feel like the industry is disingenuous when it says like, hey, our hands are tied. We're just giving the people what they want. Well, yeah, but that's true about, the food industry where people eat too much stuff that's bad for them and they could really eat more healthy foods that, it's their fault sort of, but it doesn't, I don't think it exculpates them from any responsibility. The whole notion that because it's bigger, it ought to cost more, or that an SUV that's based on a Ford Focus should cost almost double what a Ford Focus does. That's artificial, and that was created, and it was a giant con of the world public that people think, well, oh right, it's 3 inches taller, so I should pay $10,000 more for the same pieces. It was a game changer for the companies, and you see what their fundamental impulse is, and not that there's anything surprising or illegal about it, but when where there became chip shortages, suddenly they're like, well, we only have enough chips for our most expensive cars. Sorry, everybody. Maybe that's natural response, but it's not that civic minded. Profit maximization is the biggest game. That's probably been true for always, but I think that there were exceptions to the rule, and they invent these kind of paradigms that people just buy into. The idea that I called out in my 1994 story, you're selling this housewife a 6,000-pound Suburban on the basis that she's going to be safer, which was demonstrably untrue then, when big SUVs rolled over at 400% the rate of regular cars. That that's because you love the environment so much. Well, you're getting 12 miles per gallon, and that that you're going to actually go off road, which they knew statistically wasn't going to happen either. So if it's just people buying what they want, why are we spending $40 billion a year marketing SUVs and $130 marketing station wagons?
It's interesting because the sort of, well, we're giving them what they want with the large trucks, and then they come out with the Maverick and the Santa Cruz, and people are like overwhelmingly very excited about those vehicles, which means that they've been spending years and years telling us that people don't want small trucks, and then they show us a small truck, and we're like, yay!
Yeah. Or when Scion came out, and they were incredibly successful out of the box, and then in the second generation, they bloated everything up. And they kind of were stiff, and people before that even happened, people were like, "Well, why did you make it get worse gas mileage and make it bigger if it was such a success?" And they were like, "Well, we're just giving the customers what they told us they wanted, but what they wanted was the original Scion, the one they bought." And now you're telling us that it's not. It's 2 years later, and that's not what they want anymore. So I think that. That may be as insoluble as like, how do you get a clean electrical grid? It's such a macro problem, but you're basically, there's a part of them that's playing to the worst in people. I once when I did this story for the New York Times Magazine, when Lincoln Blackwood and the Cadillac Escalade or EXT, whatever the pickup truck was called. Yeah. And I got sent into some deep, basement, marketing think tank that Ford had. And I was talking to these people about it and about the psychology of SUV buying and pickup truck buying. And they were remarkably frank about how it was tied to people's, sexual feelings and other feelings that like, I was like, well, like, who buys a F-350? Who's your basic customer? And they were like, he's a lonely guy. And I'm like, well, so how does
Feelings of inadequacy.
how does having this truck help? And they're like, well, he's the guy who wants to be the guy who, when your neighbor goes, I got to remove 2 refrigerators, he's like, I'll come help you do it. I got room in my truck. Like, okay. And they also were saying, like their research had shown them, this is, 1999 or something, 2000, 2001, that people, the women were driving most of the SUV buying decisions. And one of the things they explained, other than people liking to ride up high and feeling safer because they were up high, and feeling safer because they were told they were safer because they were in a 6,000-pound car, was that minivans and before them station wagons had like really crushed woman's spirit. When they'd pull up to a traffic light, some guy would pull up, some handsome young man. And when he realized she was, probably had a car full of kids, he wouldn't look at her. But when you were in an SUV and he couldn't see in the back because the windows were smoked out and because you were up so high, you looked like you were in play. Even if you were not looking to be in play, it made people feel good to know that they were getting checked out in that way, which seemed really like, weird insights into what
goes into marketing.
Yeah,
marketing is a creepy place.
Well, I asked them,
It is.
I have this new engine line you call Power Strokes. And like, what exactly does that mean? And they were like, well, what do you think? And I was like, well, it sounds kind of dirty. And they were like, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway.
All right.
It's a great world.
Power Stroke, everyone. That's the title of the title of the show now.
we're all doomed. Okay. One final question I want to address from Sean Whitehurst, and he's curious about what advanced driver assist technologies are going into massive vehicles, larger vehicles. Will a U-Haul in a few years enable a novice to tow safely? Do fire trucks have surround view cameras? Can a garbage truck tell the color of a dumpster and align perfectly to fit it or to lift it? So as far as the fire trucks with surround view cameras, I don't know. If they don't today, they probably will in the next few years, in the next generation of trucks. Same thing with the garbage trucks. I imagine, at some point they will start equipping those with sensors that help to help the drivers to see, where the dumpsters are or the garbage cans.
Right.
The U-Hauls, that's an interesting one. I think that is something that we will see actually starting to happen, to enable safer towing, because we're already in trucks that people buy today. You've already got features like trailer sway control and trailer backup assist that. And GM's got their invisible trailer technology where you can mount a camera on the back of the trailer, and then it's connected to the truck, and you can see on the screen inside, you can actually see what's behind the trailer. And I expect that we will see those kinds of features coming into, as companies like U-Haul replace their fleets. I imagine we will see some of those kinds of features being put into there because, for the companies, it makes sense for them to do that. If they can make trailer towing safer and easier for their customers, they're less likely to incur damage to their vehicles. So it's going to cost them less, and their customers are more likely to come back and rent from them again if they have trucks that have those kinds of capabilities on there. So I do expect we will see that.
I want
other thoughts?
I want to counterpoint that U-Haul thing, because every U-Haul I've ever rented has always been like about 20, 30 years old. Nothing works, but about 80% of anything that's supposed to work on the U-Haul does not work.
That's true. They're always like the worst examples of vehicles that are actually still road legal at this point. So
I think it'll end up in U-Hauls as it ends up in this as the standard feature for the lowest of the lowest trim of those vehicles, because U-Haul makes a lot of money off that insurance. And I don't think U-Haul's ever cared if anyone's ever scraped up one of their things, because they just they charge you an arm and a leg because you didn't get the insurance, or B, they have the insurance, they collect the money, and they never fix the scrape.
Never fix anything. Yeah. Have they ever willingly fixed anything? No.
My cousin moved, and we parked somewhere, and the U-Haul broke down, and they were like, too bad.
Yeah, let us know what happens. All this talk about trailers reminds me of one pet peeve, though, I just have to share. It's like, why is it that cars can't tow anymore? That the stated limits for what an SUV based on a car will tow are often double or more the capacity, which is another way to steer people into more profitable SUVs. Camry, you couldn't get a trailer hitch for a Camry, but things that you can, they're like, oh, it's 1,000 pounds, that's max you can tow. So you can tow a small U-Haul trailer, but you can't tow 2,000 or 3,500 or whatever they say a RAV4 is, and there's no towing package that will get you there. So I think that's part of the conspiracy.
I saw a Subaru Legacy wagon. This is about a month ago, towing a single horse trailer in Germany. So If you have a Subaru Legacy wagon and you have a single horse trailer, you should have no problem towing your horse around.
Well, Europeans have a much different thing. I have a friend who has a V90 Volvo who had to basically send to Europe to get the Volvo tow kit for the V90, which they wouldn't recommend at the dealer here. And they were trying to get him to get an XC90 instead, but he really didn't want it. He managed to figure it out, now can tow his Alfa race car with his Volvo, but he's the only guy on his block who can do that.
Excellent. All right. I stand corrected on U-Haul then.
I just don't trust U-Haul. That's all.
15, 20 years from now, you might have some U-Hauls that have some trailer backup assist or trailer sway
As soon as it's like they don't have a choice, they have to buy it it comes with the car.
Then they'll do it.
And they'll okay, fine.
They'll be the last autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, it will be U-Hauls.
Yeah.
Just janky old 40-year-old U-Hauls rolling around, trying not to get hit by autonomous vehicles.
All right. On that note, I would like to sincerely thank Jamie Kitman for joining us this evening. This has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
O'Reilly. Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.